What is going on, everybody? It's your boy Gsluke here with our DFS preview for the Bermuda Championship. Coming out a little bit later than usual, was dealing with lack of voice there from Sunday Night Football, but also a little bit sick over the last few days, but feeling better and excited to bring you guys everything you need to know DFS wise for this weekend. We're going to go through our core picks and value picks in this video. So plays across the board, 12 of them that I'll be getting to in bunches, and I think that are either particularly good course fits, low-owned gems that have upside, or pretty much in either circumstance, going to be plays that you're going to want to at least consider for some of these large field tournaments. So a lot to talk about, again, core picks and value plays. Let's go ahead and get this thing started. As I usually do for my core picks videos, let's take a look at the key stats, get an idea of what I'm using to identify my top plays. So approach play is at the top, but you can see that 50 to 125 range is weighted especially highly. Putting's at number 2. We're looking at Bermuda putting in the last 24 rounds the most. And then things get a little bit different here. So we're looking at shots gained under windy conditions. That is going to be over an average of 15 miles an hour. So there's a lot of databases out there that give you that sort of data. So if it's over 15 miles an hour on average, I consider that a windy day. And I'm just looking at shots gained during those sort of rounds. So that's weighted in 8.5% of my model. Looking at around the green, you're going to miss a lot more greens when it's a little bit windy out there. Driving accuracy, shots gained at short courses. This is a 6,800 yard golf course. So I'm looking at shots gained at courses under 7,000 yards. Shots gained at coastal courses, so you're thinking like a Corrales Punta Cana, RSM Classic, any course that you'd say is coastal, right, where you have at least, let's say, 5 or 6 holes along the coast. We're going to count as something like that. So we're looking at that. Birdie or better percentage, comp courses, which we'll talk about a few times throughout the video. We're looking at Albany Golf Club, the home of the Hero World Challenge for that. We're also looking at Pebble Beach, looking at TPC River Highlands, the home of the Travelers Championship, and also the home of the Corrales Punta Cana, something I've gotten a little bit more into my models as the week has gone on. Really like that comp, particularly from the wind perspective. And then looking at a few of the specific stats on Bermuda and Zoysia, the types of surfaces that we have around this venue. But what I want to really hunker down on here is the weather. And it has changed a million times in the forecast to this point. Early in the week, it looked relatively benign. It looked like, especially on Thursday and Friday, it was going to be clear. Then, about over the last day and a half, it got really bad on Friday and Saturday. Rain all day and winds between 20 and 30 miles an hour. So you were looking at dicey conditions, to say the best. Likely scores well over par. And now, as of the last half an hour to an hour, and again, maybe this is the beauty of doing this on a Wednesday, it looks like it's going to be calm on Thursday and Friday. And then over the weekend, now you're starting to see some of the wind spike up. So we know that there's going to be bad weather, very likely for at least 2, maybe even 3 of the rounds this weekend. We've seen that historically. There was that one year where Brendan Todd took it to minus 24, where the weather was perfect, pristine. There wasn't, a breath out there all weekend. I would expect that to be the outlier, and for your usual coastal, Caribbean sort of conditions to rear their head a lot more often than not. Just being somebody from South Florida that's played golf all over the Caribbean before. A lot of times on cruises, I'll take my clubs with me or just rent clubs at the golf course. I played in the Bahamas at least like 10, 20 times. Never in Bermuda, which is a ways out there, by the way, if you don't know your geography. I would assume it's a similar sort of feel where like 99% of the time, 90% of the time, you have that 15 to 20 mile an hour wind sustained with those 20 to 30 mile an hour wind gusts. And players really have a hard time with that. I mean, you've seen at this golf course, the scoring average is typically right around a quarter of a stroke under par. But when the wind gets up there, it's usually a little bit over par, right? Close to right around a half a stroke over. Whereas when the wind lays down, this course will play to a stroke, maybe even a stroke and a half under par. So it really has that different identity. And as of right now, we know early in the week, it's going to play relatively easy. I can say that for Thursday, that it looks like it's going to be pristine out there. But for Friday through Sunday, I have my doubts about that. I expect there to be at least 2 rounds out of the 4 that are going to be quote unquote difficult, that we'd classify as windy conditions per my modeling, with over the 15 miles an hour sustained winds, which really takes us to a different brand of golfer. If you're looking at just dome-like conditions, bombers like a Dietrich, Meronk, going down to guys like a Nick Hardy, for example, I mean, I don't want to talk about the entire player pool here, but just birdie or better percentage, the best shots gained players in the field, we'd be just looking at pure pedigree. But with coastal conditions, with what I expect to be nasty conditions over the weekend, potentially even on Friday and Saturday. Again, that's what they were calling for as of just like an hour and a half ago, but that has changed, which is just wild to me. That shows the variance that they have with some of these forecasts. I'm expecting it to play dicey at least 2 days. And players like Seamus Power and Aaron Rye, I actually want to go ahead and lump these two players together. They're going to be 12 players to talk about, so we can't take forever on these. Very great, solid metrics when you look at their win stats. Both of them are well over a stroke gain to the field when they're under those windy conditions. You take a look at their shots gained at coastal tracks, it ends up backing that up as well. And in terms of just overall pedigree, Seamus Power is your top ranked player in the field. So, him and Moronk are up there. They're both ranked in, I believe, the top 55 of the official World Golf Rankings. Dietrich is a little bit further behind, and then there's a huge drop off until guys like Aaron Rye that are rated around 150 in the official World Golf Rankings, which I still like Aaron Rye, but I especially like Seamus Power this week. He's only 12.6% owned. I mean, Aaron Rye's 12%, so he's also a relatively low-owned play, which is clearly below somebody like a Dietrich. Denny McCarthy is your highest owned player on the slate. Even Moronk is up there in terms of ownership. So you're looking at pivots here with a Power and an Aaron Rye. And it makes sense not only from the stat perspective, which is also part of the reason it took me a little bit longer this week. I was dealing with being a little bit sick, and I was really looking at the win metrics. Not something that I do for most weeks on tour, but from what I was looking at, Power and Rye were just popping off the board when it came to pretty much any win stat that I was looking at. And it makes sense from just the eye test. Both players have a low ball flight. Seamus Power is from Ireland, has played golf not only in Ireland, Scotland, and up there in Iceland. So he's very, very much used to the, nasty, wet, windy sort of conditions that they may see this weekend. And then Aaron Rye plays with two gloves. He's from England. He's infamous for liking nasty conditions. In fact, on the DP World Tour, a lot of his top finishes where wind conditions were extremely windy over the weekend. So Seamus Power, Aaron Rye, just check that box, both from the narrative and the stat standpoint. And at least in my opinion, they're pretty much the same sort of player as these top three guys. Sure, the recent form metrics might be a little bit more flashy for these players. And just to give you an idea, right, over the last 50 measured rounds, they're gaining well over a stroke per round, whereas, it's 0.4 and 0.6 strokes respectively between those two players. So sure, they're definitely not in form when you're looking at the metrics. But from a long-term perspective, Power's the better player in terms of official World Golf Ranking. And Aaron Rye, he's done some winning internationally, right? It's not like he hasn't been to the top before. I think that they're being slept on. So those are two plays that I'm getting to. Let's move on into this 9K range. There's four guys that I like. Actually, one of them's in the 8K range. But Alex Smalley at $9,500. He played well at the Corrales Punta Cana, which I mentioned down there in Dominican. That's been a comp that I've gone more and more to as the week has gone on. That's a longer golf course. This is a shorter course. So that's the one real distinction between the two tracks. But heavy winds that are prevalent at both golf courses. And it's a track that emphasizes your putting abilities. Now, not necessarily your ball striking. I see Port Royal as a similar sort of test where it's kind of more about your putting than anything. And then on Bermuda, Alex Smalley is his best self. So you've seen him do well at some of the comps I'm looking at, and of course, for his career on the surface. So he's a better player than some of these guys here too. I mean, Alex Smalley's ball striking is through the roof, gaining in both those categories. Around the green is right around a neutral, and the putter hasn't been all that hot over the last 50 measured rounds, but he does his best work on Bermuda. So I like a lot of the things we're seeing there. Russell Knox is another wind specialist. Now, if we look at the metrics, they're not all that great for Knox because he hasn't had that many good starts of late, but he's still gaining with the irons like he's always going to. Off the tee, around the green, and with the putter, a slight negative. A little bit more than slight there with the off the tee play, which is kind of what you expect. He's not one of the longer players on tour, but this is a weak field event. He's not going to lose nearly as many strokes off the tee in this event as he would for most. He's going to have one of the maybe top 5, top 10 iron plays, iron weeks of anybody in the field. He might be number one at the end of the week. He has that kind of iron game, particularly in this strength of field. I think he's got a chance to, at the very least, top 5, top 10, if not win this event, if he can spike the putter, which is really what holds him back. But you can see of late, over the last 50 measured rounds, it hasn't been that bad, right? He's just a slight negative. And on Bermuda, it's not his favorite surface. You can see he's losing right around a quarter of a stroke per round. I don't think it's impossible, though, or inconceivable for him to go out there and maybe gain like 2-3 strokes to the field over the weekend, especially in this strength of field. And then with his ball striking metrics, that could win him in this event. I mean, he's that sort of player, right? He's won on tour a few times before. This could very well be the next one that he adds to his docket. I do like Adam Long there at $8,900. Not the longest player off the tee, but loves Bermuda's accurate. It's one of the key stats that I'm looking at. And much like a lot of the players that we've talked about, with the win metrics, is popping off the board. He's a low ball flight player. He's had success at Corrales, a few other of the quote-unquote tropical events like we have there at Mayakoba. He's shown up there in the top 10, top 15 at a few of those events. And in the swing season is really where he makes his hay. Now, he's not one of the best players on tour, but he's extremely consistent. And in this week of a field is where he can really differentiate or separate himself from some of his peers. So I really like him, and I love him, especially if he's a little bit more expensive, because no one wants to get to him, right? He's 12.3% owned. And yeah, Russell Knox as well, only 12.5% owned, right? So both very reasonable in terms of their ownership. You can play them in about 25% of lineups and get your leverage there. If not, be a little bit more aggressive and try and take advantage of it even more so. And the last core pick we'll get to before we hop into these values is going to be Erik Van Rooyen. And boy, oh boy, has this guy fallen off a cliff ever since having his child. You can remember he had a kid, went out there, won, I believe, like the next week. And then ever since then, I'm sure as he was adapting to being a father, fatigue starts to stick in. And he had to take a few weeks off. And then he came back, was rusty, shot an 80, I believe, once or twice over the last month or so of last season. Is not on the right foot right now. So if you look at the last 50 measured rounds for him, you'll see why he's priced where he is. He's just slight gainer off the tee and on approach, losing around the green and losing with the putter. That's not who Erik Van Rooyen is. He's a much better player than that long term. He's an explosive ball striker that should be gaining closer to a third of a stroke per round in both of those categories, and a spike putter. Somebody who can go out there, gain 7 or 8 strokes on the greens from week to week, but is also capable of losing 7 or 8 strokes on the greens. He's kind of like a Sebastian Munoz. And honestly, from like a talent standpoint, they're essentially the same player, Sebastian Munoz and Erik Van Rooyen. I legitimately think that having a child is probably going to take a lot out of most players, particularly somebody that was just clicking at the right time, right? Got that tour win under their belt, and then just completely disappears. I mean, we've seen that happen before, but for that to also coincide with him having the child, I think it makes too much sense for my department. He's a little bit more removed from that at this point. He should be a little bit more settled in to parenthood, and I think he's just a way better player than his peers. In fact, I think that Erik Van Rooyen is probably the best player in this field. Like, I don't think that that's a hot take. When you look at the official World Golf Rankings, I mean, he's up there with a lot of, again, Seamus Power, for example, Aaron Rai, he's ranked right around that sort of range, like 100. So he's not up there in the top 50, like, Seamus Power, but he's in that mid-tier range where he certainly shouldn't be $8,000, right? He's a 10K golfer based on his official World Golf Ranking. And with the upside of winning on tour, we know that the irons can get there. I think there's a lot more upside to EVR than a lot of people think, right? He's only 7.5% owned, and he's the only outright bet that I've made this week. I got him at 75-1, and if you're going to tell me that he's going to be single-digit owned too, I mean, I guess it's going to be EVR week for me, right? And for better or worse, he may go out there, show the negative end of that volatility. He has not played all that much of late, and they may end up showing out on the golf course, right? And if that's the case, then so be it, right? 25%, maybe 35% of my lineups are going to be dead. But if he ends up hitting and getting to a top 5, top 10 performance, legitimately, I think this is a top 5 player in this field, and he's going to be single-digit owned. Like, I cannot pass that up. So that's the thought process there. And yeah, he's going to be a core pick for me, not just somebody that I'm getting marginal leverage to. Moving on into our values, I love Sam Ryder. He's been ball striking the heck out of it over the last 50 measured rounds. You can see he's gaining close to half a stroke per round on approach. Same story with Chesson Hadley. He's actually the next value pick, gaining very close to half a stroke per round on approach as well. Now, his off the tee play isn't quite as strong. Both are still a negative in that category. His putting is otherworldly. And if you looked at our Key stats over here, first off approach, number 2, shots gained putting on Bermuda. So he's not only been a solid putter, but on Bermuda, he gains close to 3/4 of a stroke per round. So in fact, even better on Bermuda than what we've seen over his last 50 measured rounds. So I love both of those players. Will be, because of their iron play and the putting for both of them, and I'll be there in bunches. Like Austin Smotherman's ball striking. Now, the last 50 measured rounds have actually been a little bit worse for him than we're used to seeing. He's getting close to 1/3 of a stroke off the tee, a slight gainer on approach. The reason why I say it's slightly disappointing is we're used to seeing him gain at least 1/3 of a stroke in probably both of those categories. Kind of similar to an EVR, right? Where, they've been okay of late, right? They're still positives. They're going to be clear positives this week in this sort of weak field. But we actually expect even more from them. So it's a bounce back spot. He's 7,500. If he was coming in with form, he'd probably be at the very least like $8,700, $8,800. So I think you're getting a little bit of a salary break. Bermuda isn't his favorite surface, but, we're at the point of this field, particularly when we start to get down to some of these lower tier guys, where you're getting what you're paying for, right? So, 8.6% owned, $7,500. I'm willing to play some Austin Smotherman this week. Next up, we've got CT Pan at $7,300. CT Pan is another pedigree play. Somebody I think is just a lot better than his peers. He's won on tour before. He's been in contention over the last 3 to 4 months. And in terms of a course fit, also fits some of the wind metrics we're looking at. And he's only 9% owned. It's not like he's chalk for this range. So in general, he's checking a lot of the boxes that, we're trying to tick off here. And not much more to say than that. Like, it's just a pedigree play. He's better than his peers. You look at his long-term form, his actual accolades on tour, like what he's actually accomplished, just a better player, more established, more consistent player than all of the guys around him. And it's not even close. So that's the idea there. Next up, we got MJ Daffy, a little bit more of a speculative play. I believe there's 2 more picks left in terms of value picks. MJ Daffy, he's somebody I bought in early on when it came to his Korn Ferry Tour status. First time on a PGA Tour I played him. I played well at the Open Championship, another spot that I got exposure to him. And the first few starts this season haven't been ideal. So if we take a look at the recent form there at $7,200, MJ Daffy has gone, he's had a few okay starts where he had the one made cut, 2 missed cuts sandwiched in there. He's just long-term, somebody that I expect to pan out on tour, somebody I think will be at least retaining their card year to year. So I don't think he's going to be a superstar by any means. But with the guys priced around him being players that we hardly ever see, we probably won't ever see after the season again on the PGA Tour, these are the sort of players that I'm trying to buy down low. So $7,200, only 4.1% owned, another spot to get to MJ. And lastly, we've got Chad Rainey. So Chad Rainey at $6,900 has played well at Corrales, so he won that last year. That's the event that he won that got him into a lot of these events that we've seen him in. And in general, he's been playing a lot better than his scorecard has shown. He's had a lot of blow-up rounds, and a lot of these no-cut events, he's still finished towards the bottom of the board, but he's had rounds of like 7 or 8 birdies. And the reason I know this is I'm not a huge Chad Rainey fan by any means, right? So I'm not watching all of his scorecards because I'm betting against him on prize picks for birdies. And you would think that Chad Rainey's just getting ran over, right, with all of these bad performances. Even when he's at a no-cut event, he's finishing in like 50th place. But no, he's making 7, 8 birdies around, just like 2, 3 double bogeys around. It's just some of the more ridiculous scorecards that you're going to see. The fact of the matter is, on a resort-style course, if he can limit those blow-up holes and just go out there, play clean golf, he could easily win an event. Like, his birdie production is on another level at this point. Like, there's a reason why Prize Picks is dangling that carrot out there on Chad Rainey, is they realized, I think a little bit earlier than most, certainly earlier than I did, the guy's still making a shit ton of birdies, and it's almost unexplainable. Just go look at it. Look at the last few months. It's ridiculous for Chad Rainey. So I think he's a lot closer in terms of his form than the metrics look like. I mean, look at his Bermuda numbers. Horrible. His metrics in general across the board. He's one of the worst players in the field. I'm still getting there because I've seen those breadcrumbs of just somebody waiting to break out, and he's played well at a comp course that I'm looking at. So that's all I had to see there, and honestly, to go out there and sell me on a Chad Rainey. All right, fellas, that is all I've got for the DFS preview. We will be going live tonight at 7 p.m. Eastern time, touching on any of your questions, a weather report for this weekend, so we'll get the most up-to-date look at what to expect. We'll talk through wave advantages, talk through GPP hand building process, some of the chalky builds that'll be out there, whether people are going to studs and duds or a little bit more balanced this week. All of the things that you need to know before building your lineup. So make sure to set a reminder for that, again, 7 p.m. tonight. And best of luck with all of your lineups, any outright bets that you decide to go with. And go ahead and comment down below who you've got winning this week. I'm personally going to have to go out there and take Aaron Rai, maybe a Seamus Power. I think both of those guys have a good shot. But the only outright bet that I've taken, so the only one that really counts for this argument, is Erik Van Rooyen. It's my only outright bet against 75-1 odds. So I'm sweating that one out. Go ahead and let me know down below who you're sweating this week. And again, until next time, until the live stream tonight, best of luck, and I'll catch you guys later.